Hi everyone. Today, India AI Conversations have a very special guest. That is Mr. Sandosh K. Mishra, who is the head of Tamil Nadu e-governance agency. Mr. Mishra and his team has been doing some fabulous work in the last few months. In fact, in last 1 year, they have done so many works which exceeds the work that has many European countries has done in terms of AI. So I'm very glad to welcome you to this particular conversation. Welcome, sir, to India AI.
Thank you so much, Jibu. It's a pleasure always to talk to you and meet you.
Sir, tell me, the work you guys have done, the team has done from facial recognition, attendance systems to, cataract identification system, which is the latest one from your pipeline. They were all very interesting and, emphasis on governance aspect, on getting things done from the side of a government, using this technology. So can you give us a brief overview? What is the approach of TNEGA as well as yours in role of AI in governance, and what is the approach? What are the products TNEGA has done so far?
Yeah, Jibu, thank you for this question. And I think we in TNEGA had been an early pioneers, if you will. We started looking at these technologies, and particularly this artificial intelligence and blockchain, as technologies of the future. And our vision is inspired by what's happening in these fields since 2018, and that's when I joined this organization. And with the support of the government of Tamil Nadu, we have actually started creating a set of solutions using these technologies which will impact governance in a significant way. So AI, of course, has been one of the key technologies we are using. And we are also looking at blockchain. We are also looking at creating digital identity. So we have a project as we speak. In fact, we have a project which is called State Family Database, which is essentially a digital identity project, which intends to create a digital identity for all the residents of Tamil Nadu. So AI, so the way we had kind of envisioned the whole thing is that you have to have these pillars of digital identity, which is a state family database, which is essentially, today, if you look at what is the biggest challenge in governance, the biggest challenge in governance today is being able to break the departmental silos. I mean, departments have their data, and for a good reason. I mean, of course, they have a concern about privacy. They don't want to let the data go out of their control. They also are concerned what will happen to the transactions, and there's a need for preserving these transactions and protecting them as well. So the problem of e-governance, or in fact, the problem of governance today is that you have all these silos which exist. So there are 40 odd departments. Everybody has their own version of truth, their own version of databases, their own version of record keeping. And they have been built and they have come in existence at different point of times and on a different technology stack. So some would have come 15 years ago, some would have come 30 years ago, some would have come 5 years ago, and some are being built now. So obviously all their technology stacks are different. Their granularity is different. Their organization and architecture is different. And how do they talk to each other? Every time you want to utilize AI, every time you want to build a blockchain solution, you have to lay it on the foundation of this integrated or federated or harmonized databases, whichever way you choose to name them. So this is the first leg or first pillar, which is state family database. The second pillar is to build a highway, if you will. We call it blockchain highway, which is Nambika-NM. Both digital identity state family database as well as this Nambika-NM, both these we have already done a lot of proof of concept, and we have kind of architected the solution. So this blockchain highway is built on this digital identity project. And on top of that, the third thing which we got from the government, approval from the government, is to attempt to deliver predictive services. So why, I mean, the question we asked is why people have to actually go and knock at the doors of the government offices. Why can't government offices deliver services to the citizens without them having to reach you first? And I'll illustrate this with an example. Is that, for example, when in Tamil Nadu particularly, and I think more or less in many of the states of the country, you have a very strong prenatal management MIS system. So you have a good capture of pregnancies into the system. In Tamil Nadu, it is almost 99.9% or even higher. So once you capture the pregnancy, so then all the benefits or all the services which the individual needs. So for example, you get this Movalur Ramamritam, that is Tamil Nadu version of Janani Suraksha Yojana, which is popularly known as Janani Suraksha Yojana elsewhere. So you get this 2,000 rupees every trimester to the pregnant mother. So all that, it doesn't need another application or another form or another visit to a government office to get these services. And then not only this, then the whole chain starts. Then you have, folic acid delivery and you have monitoring during the pregnancy and after pregnancy, the immunization chart of children. See, as I was mentioning earlier, in our families, we are very meticulous. We maintain the immunization records of children very, very meticulously, and we preserve it for a very long period, for 15 years, till they reach almost adulthood. Till that point of time, we maintain the immunization records. But that's not necessarily true for all the relatively disadvantaged families, whether socially disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged. And one of the things I always say, that the burden of proof and burden of documentation is disproportionately high on a poorer section of society. And it's a great thing that now, of course, Government of India's digital locker, DigiLocker, has been a great scheme to actually mitigate that burden. So I'm saying that this, and that's a separate, connection we need to really work on. So every time there's the NDHM, which is National Digital Health Mission, and electronic health records and immunization records, everything should flow into a digital locker. But saying this, that so once the baby is born, the immunization should happen, and it should be automatically delivered to the family. You should have, once the baby is 3-year-old, she should be automatically enrolled in the ICDS center, which is Anganwadi center. Once she is 5, a message should go to the parent saying that this is your nearest Aadhaar enrollment center. Please take her to Aadhaar enrollment on such and such date. Your appointment has been fixed. Once she goes to and she touches 5, then again, apart from Aadhaar, you need to take her into a school as well. So that also can be delivered on this. Once you take her to the school, you also need to deliver her community certificate, because that entitles for certain type of scholarship, certain types of benefits from the government. So again, none of this needs a separate application or a separate visit to a government office. This all can flow smoothly. Her name to be added in the ration card, that can be automatic, right? You don't have to go and knock at the door of Taluk Supply Officer or a District Supply Officer to get the name added to the ration card. It's all coming through that chain of services, and this is what the vision, the grand vision is. So you have this digital identity state family database, a blockchain top layer on a blockchain highway, and I'll talk about it more if time permits later, which is open to public sector as well, private sector as well. So it will be not only this blockchain solution or the blockchain infrastructure we are building, we are calling it Nambika NAM, is not open. It's not only exclusively for government use. It's actually meant to be used by the private sector as well. And that's where the ecosystem and the networking effect and the unlocking of value will happen. And then you have this predictive service delivery. And in between, where we find weaknesses, where we find the government infrastructure is little stretched, we plug it in with AI solutions. And that's where this face recognition and the disease and pest control for pest identification and disease identification in the agriculture crops, that application. Then this cataract application is a very fascinating one, and I'll talk a little more about it. That's when this all comes. And in the basis, the foundation is built on a grand vision which government of Tamil Nadu supported us, is that we should have a center of excellence in emerging technologies. We should have people from the private sector working at some of the real governance issues, cutting edge governance issues, and coming up with solutions for that. So all our applications, all our designs, all our architecture, all our solutions are actually crafted in-house. We may outsource for, building a layer on top, or doing some cosmetic work, or, just writing the code. We are the actual thinking, the actual crafting, actual solution building happens in-house, which is what is significantly important. And I would encourage other state governments also to take a look at it. So that was a very long answer to your short question.
It's really fascinating how I mean, we used to have a time when going to government offices for access to government services has been such a big headache, right? And I believe this friction between using government services, accessing them, has been one of the reasons why people often turn away from the government. The services open, or even tax, right? Paying the tax. There used to be a whole very complex process, right? And which required expertise back then. So this is a new way of approaching governance, right? You predict things before a citizen, started to think about it. I think that's definitely the way of future, right? The future of governance is in predictive services, and I'm so happy to see Tamil Nadu implementing it, way ahead of many countries, and and other states. Now, coming to AI in particular, you mentioned some of the interesting programs, the pest identification program, the facial recognition program, and most importantly, the cataract program. Considering that, if identified early and undergone the correct treatment, permanent blindness can be prevented in most cases. So, can you elaborate on these AI powered initiatives that's where out of TNEJ's stable?
Absolutely. So we started off with this face recognition, and we realized that, there are a lot of solutions available for face recognition out there. There's a whole GitHub and all kinds of stuff is there. But then the problem is that many of those solutions are actually not geared and not optimized for Indian conditions. So what we built is basically we optimized the solution for Indian faces. One, we also optimized it for a low camera resolution. We also optimized it for low light, because many places may not be well lit. Also, we did one interesting high contrast. So like half the face is in the shadow and another half is in the sun. Because primarily we were thinking of using these systems for contactless attendance. Whether it is in government offices, we implemented it in a couple of schools to try it out. They work very well. And of course, the corona struck, and that's when this suddenly it dawned upon everyone that government offices will be it will be really helpful for offices to take the attendance. So we have actually, our office, we are running it successfully, and we have now also got a lot of interest from other government offices. So we are supplying to some other government offices to use the system for attendance. But not only for attendance, you can actually use it for, like one of the things we were finding out when we were talking to the schools, every day they spend about 45 minutes on taking attendance. So if you can spare that time, and this system is very good, you just mount it somewhere and let anyone walk in. You don't have to stop. You don't have to, you have to peek into the device. It doesn't require all that. It's it's an edge computing version. So you actually don't require Wi-Fi. You don't require any kind of extra support. All you need is power and that's about it. It's a small self-contained dabba which you just put it and forget it. So this is what we have come up with, and it can save a lot of time, energy, and for multiple applications, and there are multiple applications, of course, for this technology. Second thing was this agriculture disease and pest control app. So we have, the agriculture department here is very tech savvy. So they have an app called Ulvan app, which is basically farmers app, and it has reached about 5 lakh farmer families, and it has all kinds of information like market information and availability of agriculture tools, etc. So there we added a module called pest and disease control module. So where the farmers, all they need to do is just click a picture of the crop, and it will take that image, do a diagnosis. There you need a Wi-Fi solution. It's not a standalone thing because it's going on a mobile app. So it uploads the picture and comes back with a solution and diagnosis saying that your crop is afflicted by this disease or this pest, and this is what the solution is. So that's another fascinating thing. We are working on it. I think we have had some moderate success primarily because it's very surprising. We don't have a good database of pest images and diseases. This is very surprising. We raked through the agriculture department, universities of Tamil Nadu, and they have books, but then you need digitized good quality images which are not there. So slowly we are building that database. So we started off with 2 crops and 3 diseases, 3 pests, paddy and maize, and 3 pests. So it's working with moderate success. We need one more round of better collection of data to make that accuracy go up, and also we want to extend it to top 5 crops of Tamil Nadu. So that's the plan. So that's moving ahead. The third one was the cataract one. This is again, I was just reading. What happened was that the Blindness Control Society of Tamil Nadu, they reached out to us and said that they have a staff shortage, and all these AI solutions are great solutions for places where you need to do a routine diagnostics and you are stretched for resources. So for triaging in medical imaging particularly, they are very, very helpful. So they said that can you suggest a solution, and that's when we started thinking about it. And now the solution is very good. We have trained it with almost, I think, 850 images. Accuracy levels are around 70-75%. All the person has to do, a volunteer has to do. The Blindness Control Society does not have to depend on doctors alone or healthcare professionals alone. We can just do a very simple 10-minute training of any individual, any youth, any student of the village, and he or she can just go and click the eyes of elderly people, and in seconds it comes back and says that, oh, these are people who have a mature cataract and they need to be taken to the hospital as quickly as possible. About 5 million blinds in India, 2/3 of them have lost their eyesight because of this late diagnosis or undiagnosed cataract. So it's not an irreversible blindness. It was completely preventable blindness, but and this is very true for rural areas, for low-income areas in the urban slums, and low-income settlements in urban areas, and particularly if the elderly. They keep ignoring it because they think that their eyesight is getting weak as the time progresses, which is a fact, and they don't really pay attention that it is something which is preventable. And lack of literacy, lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, and a general apathy, I guess, gets them into serious trouble, and they lose their eyesight. So this solution, we tried it. Now the field trials are going on. Yesterday there was a field trial in one of the districts in Karur. Very, very encouraging results. People are finding it very, curiosity, and oh, this can tell us this also. And what it does is, instead of that limited resource which the Blindness Control Society has in the district, instead of that resource going and scanning every possible individual out in the field, every elderly person, it can now focus on only the 10% or 12% or 15% or 20% of those who are vulnerable and who are on the verge of, they need to be operated upon on priority basis. So it helps prioritize the cases. There, it can tell you, oh, these cases, okay, we will take them in after a month or 2 months, 3 months, it doesn't matter. But these cases, let's take them in quickly. So with the limited resources, your impact will be better in public service delivery. You will prevent a huge number of blindness by using this app. So this is what is going on. It's still premature to call it a success because we have done only limited field trials. We have, I think, screened maybe about 700 to 1,000 individuals in the field. Accuracy levels, as I said, are somewhere between 70 to 80%. Once I haven't trained the algorithm with the newly acquired data, we will train that. Hopefully, the expectation is that the accuracy will go up. And then we'll do one particular district and do a full trial in that district. That's the plan. Hopefully, next 1 month. And then we will know whether it is a real success or not. But the signs are very, very encouraging right now.
This is one of the aspects of AI that actually, encouraging and positively gives us more confidence looking into future. Because one of the big challenges we face as a country, with such a huge rural population, is the lack of diagnosticians and diagnostic centers, right? And when you can have this kind of tools, the first level of diagnosis can be done, then they can be brought on to a nearby town or a major city for the next level of treatment. And this is very fascinating and very helpful. It's very interesting and noble to see such initiatives coming from the government side. But when I remember recently I saw some of the videos of the facial recognition software being put used in a school, and I shared it in my social media, and the immediate reaction was a little bit of skepticism, right? I think thanks to China, whenever we say facial recognition, because of their use of AI softwares in Hong Kong and other part, AI and facial recognition got a bad reputation. So, and now we're talking about healthcare data. But surprisingly, I want to point out that if people normally ask, okay, this agency is using facial recognition, healthcare data, but what is the responsibility? But interestingly enough, Tamil Nadu has came out with a report on responsible use of AI, ethical and safety standards. So, that's like augmenting this this notion and pretty much telling the people you don't have to worry about this. Can you elaborate on that approach?
Thank you, Jibu, for this question. And I think we are very conscious of the fact that AI has its own pitfalls. What happens is that we framed the rules even before we stepped into the arena. And that was a very, very conscious and very forethought choice we made. So, because we know, and I have a particular interest in ethical AI, we know that there are issues with AI, and there are problems with AI, and we cannot let it be completely, open and without any restriction field. So we brought out this ethical AI policy, which is a policy of the Tamil Nadu government, which says that any AI solution being rolled out in public domain has to adhere to the 7 ethical principles, which convenient acronym is called DEEP-MAX. So D stands for diversity, E for equity, which is also fairness, ethics, and privacy. So privacy is one of the very key elements of the 7. And then misuse protection. That's another concern which we have. And of course, accountability, which can be even thought of, because explainable AI is a big thing. So explainability in that sense, and cross-geography application. So these 7 parameters we need to, because people and their habits and features changes tremendously as you move across geographies, even within the states. In India, it is a very, very large country. So even within the state, the cross-geographical applications, because of their looks, because of their features, because of their habits, because of the way they dress, are very, very different. I mean, there are communities in parts of Tamil Nadu which dress very differently from the other set of communities, and they look very different actually. So, and same thing is, I mean, as I said, India is a large, very, very huge. I mean, it's a continent almost. So, we were very conscious of this, and this DeepMax is a framework we put in place, saying that these are the rules we are going to play with. I mean, these are the rules we are going to play by with, and this is any AI solution has to observe that. Facial recognition, there is a skepticism, completely agreed. So, but 2-3 things which we have done. One is that it's an edge computing device, so nothing gets out of that device. I mean, there is everything there. Secondly, I think people have this wrong notion that the photos are stored and they are transmitted and all that. Nothing like that. I mean, people who are in the know of the things, they know that there are features extracted from the faces. And it is those faces, you can't create a face based on those features. I mean, so and those features are compared. So actually what the device stores is not really photographs or images. It's actually certain numbers and bits. It's some zeros, random set of zeros and ones, and there is no way in the world you can actually go back to creating a facial image out of that. So I think that bit needs a bit of communication and effective communication and bit of awareness building. But it's a completely privacy preserving. Everything resides on that edge computing device. We don't take anything out. We keep everything there, and it's in the hands of the people. And of course, for organizations, there is absolutely no issues, because I mean, in fact, for employees, it's a great boon. You don't have to touch anything, and particularly with Corona coming in, you don't want to touch give your thumb imprint. You just walk in and your attendance is taken. Everybody feels very happy about it. So. But yes, it's a valid point, and we have laid out rules by which ethics and privacy and misuse protection will be governed in here.
I think I want to add at this point that you have also been very actively involved in academia as well, publishing papers and writing them. And I think that might have, seen, that's another thing I want to bring up in this conversation. But going back to one of the points you mentioned to me before, that all these programs and initiatives that have been created by TNEJ, which is now open to other states, right? They can also adopt and they can evolve. And in that same way, you have also created these norms, ethical norms, responsible AI norms, which also they can now follow, and they don't have to go back to the drawing board, work from the scratch. It is such a great initiative to give responsible AI, such a big importance. Now, sir, you pointed out before one of the challenges about creating these, AI models is data in silos. So can you tell me what are the other challenges you have faced, alongside these data issues as well?
Right. So I'll just touch upon what you mentioned. In fact, I would like to reiterate that we are doing this, whatever we are doing, it's a public knowledge. We want to make it available to other state governments. One of our objectives is to actually create low cost and scalable and indigenous solutions for governance. I mean, that's what our Center of Excellence and TNEJ's motto is. So anything which we are creating, we are more than happy, and we invite other state governments to come and take a look at it. They can take our code, they can use it as they like, they can even modify it if they want, and they can even seek our assistance in modification also if they want. So all these solutions which we are building or creating are readily available for others to adopt. Responsible AI, you have rightly said, it's a deep research area, and I think we have been engaging with it for last couple of years, and particularly I, in my individual capacity, also have a huge interest in this area. So whatever work I have done in that, so sort of we have tried to learn from that and bring this policy out. So and this policy is, again, people don't have to go back to the drawing board and reinvent everything. They can use this policy and frame their AI, responsible AI rules around this. And DeepMax is a very powerful, very, very simple and powerful toolkit, if you will, for policy administrators on when to roll out an AI policy safely in public domain. And it's, as I said, each of these 7 parameters is a difficult parameter to put in numbers. But to begin with, even a binary check, meaning I have seen this, I'm convinced, even if it is an individual and subjective check also, it will make a huge impact. So even if if the policy administrator decides, okay, I have seen this AI solution and I'm convinced that it meets enough diversity requirements of my state or my country, or I have seen this, it doesn't have a fairness problem. I know it doesn't have elements which can cause misuse of this AI. So even if it's a very, very subjective and a binary yes, no answer to 7 parameters, still it will make AI much safer than it is possibly in absence of, then it will possibly be in absence of this. So this is something I just wanted to reiterate. In terms of challenges, as I said, data is a big challenge. We are supposed to be a great data generating country. But I think, again, if you look at it, data is also becoming a monopoly. I mean, there are certain enterprises which control a huge amount of data, and obviously they make use of it. And not necessarily everyone else has an access to that data. And I think that is what needs to be addressed by this data protection bill, which is coming from which is hopefully coming soon, is that who's an ultimate owner of that data? And the owner of the data, I always say, should benefit from his or her data. So whether I have agreed to give my data in return for a service from an enterprise, still that enterprise has to look and give me an equitable share in the profits that enterprise is making by my data. I think that's, again, this is, I must at this point of time put a disclaimer. This is my individual views. These don't reflect the views of any of the governments, but this is what I believe. You recently saw what happened with Facebook and Australia, standoff. And that was precisely the point. Who owns the data? Right? And the person who owns the data, or the organization which owns the data, needs to be fairly compensated for it. I think going forward, we should be looking at a possible model where Jibu, when he gives access to his data to a food delivery or to a cab aggregator or to some other company, you have a fair right to demand that either delete my data or give me compensation for that data. I think sooner or later it's going to come.
I think it's becoming very critical that data is the fuel for machine learning and AI. And as our Honorable Minister Shri Ravi Shankar Prasad has also put, India has a lot of data assets. Our biggest asset is data. And I think in the next few years, we will be able to utilize them, like the initiatives from your department, how, for a greater good of, human. And I think the policy works as also very, very important to ensure the proper administration, as well as, custodian, who will be the proper custodian of this data in our country. So, sir, before winding up, one last question. What are the other initiatives that's in the pipeline with the NEGA, which we can expect in the coming months?
Yeah, so the blockchain is coming up soon,
yes.
The common blockchain infrastructure for the entire state. And we should see this predictive service. Before that, the digital identity should happen. I mean, again, both of them are in the pipeline. There is already a lot of work which we have done. We have built a proof of concept. We have built not only proof of concept, we have built a scalable proof of concept. So we need we are looking for partners. We've just floated the tenders are already out. So those listening to this and interested in helping us build this are welcome to participate. The tenders will be available for, I think, another 30 days or so for both the state family database and the blockchain common infrastructure. So we invite good partners, good enterprises to come and help us build this. As I said, the architecting is already done. The proof of concept, the scalable proof of concept is already done. All I need to do is just add more code to it. So we are looking for those two things. Predictive service delivery will happen after these two are built. So that will be the third component. And this cataract one and the face recognition one, we want to really scale that up for office attendance. The face recognition one for the office attendance, and also the face recognition one is, people, you were mentioning, people are skeptical about it. but there is a huge purpose you can serve, which is this Jeevan Praman, which is people who are pensioners have to actually prove that they are alive once a year to continue getting their pension. And I don't know if you saw, about a few months ago, I saw a very disturbing visual on one of the news channels. A lady who's supposed to claim her pension because she retired from one of the government offices and lives in a village. She can't move. She can't move her limbs. And her son, because this is the only source of income for them possibly, puts her on a cot and drags that cot several kilometers, I think about 8 to 10 kilometers, to the headquarters where she has to be seen and certified to be live. I think that's a very disturbing imagery. And this face recognition, which we are working on building a solution based on this, which will be that you just make a video call and the system will tell you whether you are a real person, or it's a video being played, or it's a static image which is being displayed. And this will actually give so much support and so much help to elderly people and all the
pensioners.
And as I said, particularly those who are really, as I said, I mean, this is very disturbing. There are pensioners who can't really move. They find it very hard to move. So, and many of them are from very, very poor families. And families, it's not possible. Even if you had money, I know they can't even sit for 1 hour or half an hour. They find it extremely difficult to sit. So they're just lying on the bed all the time. I mean, imagine if we have to drag them up from their place all the way. Of course, Government of India has brought out this where the postman, I think the postal department, the postman visits and does it. But then I don't know if it is possible everywhere. So this can be a technology solution. Wherever you have a human intervention, you have a limited reach. You have a problem of scale. A postman can visit maybe 10 families a day, but it can't visit 100 families a day. Whereas this application can do 1 million families a day. So this is the second thing which we are working on right now. We haven't tried it. We have done a lab test so far. So lab test is successful, but we haven't tried it in the field. When we take it to the field, then only we will know whether it is really successful or not. That's where we need to. So that's why we need to be very, very open to ideas. Don't get really worried about the negative side always. And of course, I mean, you have to see. It's always, I mean, technology has always been a double-edged sword. So it can actually cut both ways. And if you have responsible framework in place, then you need not worry about it. If you don't have a framework, then you may get hurt. So, when somebody, when the welder does welding, for example, so he puts that protective gear and then does the welding. So that doesn't hurt him. But if you don't have a protective gear and you try to do welding, you will go blind. So that's the problem with AI or blockchain for that.
That's a very good example, sir, you pointed out. And thank you very much for sparing us your valuable time. And I'm sure all these projects you have mentioned, one of the characteristics I have been noticing is the scalability, how they can scaled up and they can be used across the country, not just within the state. So I hope, I wish a lot of best wishes to you and a lot of success to your team and everyone behind these great projects. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jibu. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me here.